As has been mentioned, tonight we are celebrating Beth Amen, and as such, I am thrilled to invite up our speaker this evening, who is not only a Beth man himself, but is also the newest of the co-chairs, co-presidents of Beth Amen. So Jeff Carmel joined the ranks of Jerry Spector and Marcel Bergman as one of the three primary leaders of Beth Amen, taking a seat at the board of directors as well. So Jeff, wonderful to have you up on the bima with us this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Heath. And I hope this is coming through. Yeah. Well, about 3 weeks ago, Rabbi Nemitov, from, I guess, his vacation site, sent me a note and said, would you please speak this evening on your personal Jewish journey? I thought that was pretty interesting. But at any rate, that's what you're going to get, my personal Jewish journey. And it starts, figuratively speaking, in 1492. I'm not that old, but it's the date every school children learns is the date Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But before, well before I had ever learned about Columbus, I knew about the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, including our family, who lived there for many, many, probably centuries. This after years of persecution, forced conversions, autos de fe, and all this under the malign supervision of the fanatical Catholic priest Torquemada. It is from here that my Jewish journey begins, sitting at my grandmother's knees. My maternal grandmother, Alea Sholem, was an extraordinary raconteur, and she loved regaling her grandchildren with our family's history. Growing up in a prosperous family in Romania, she was educated both in a local convent and with private tutors, and she mastered European history and spoke multiple languages. Our family, she related, prospered in Spain during its golden age, with doctors, diplomats, statesmen, bankers, many in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. But with the Inquisition and the expulsion, the family fled, and the storyline disappears for the next 300 years, until the birth of my great-great-grandfather in a Turkish graveyard, fleeing from who knows where, likely fleeing for their lives, and who knows where they ended up. But eventually, they get to Romania. And the family name was Alcalá, most likely from a small town just outside of Madrid, Alcalá. And in Romania, the family again prospered. And when my grandmother's grandfather died and the family was sitting Shiva, there comes an emissary from the court of Spain to speak to her father. She remembered vividly his black robe, his broad black hat, and most certainly a bright crimson sash across his chest. And since they were sitting Shiva, he's told he would have to wait and be seen after the mourning period. He comes back, requests that the Alcalá family return to Spain, and importantly, bring all your money. He was dismissed, of course, and shortly thereafter, the family emigrates to America, fleeing the pogroms that were threatening the Jews at that time. All through my childhood, my grandmother would emphasize Jewish Sephardic traditions, the learning, the foods, even the religious aspects, which included many rabbis. But interestingly, when she and my grandfather settled in Los Angeles, Jewish philanthropy was in their DNA, but they pretty much ignored organized religion. They had a very large home in Arcadia, and it was here that Jewish holidays were celebrated, charity events were held, and there were large family gatherings. I most remember the Seders, in particular how, as little kids, we listened to the Haggadah, the telling of our Exodus story, and how we were slaves, we crossed the Red Sea, we were at Sinai, and we came to the Promised Land. All that as if we ourselves were there and partook, much as I knew that I was part of our own particular Sephardic family story. It seems to me that Pesach, the one Jewish Hag attended by practically all Jews, whether religious or not, is a key reason we have survived as a people. The Haggadah is the telling of our story, and we are part of it, and proud of it. We were there, and this pride we transmit to our children and our children's children throughout the generations, as Ross Dehovitz emphasized when he spoke from this bima 2 weeks ago. L'dor v'dor, from generation to generation. So back to my journey. Most of my friends growing up in West Los Angeles were Jewish. Though everyone was Reform or unaffiliated, we had no contact whatsoever with Orthodox Jews, and University Synagogue in Brentwood was as Reform as it gets. I went to Hebrew school, was bar mitzvahed, and had a year or two of confirmation, and like most of my peers, only attended services on the high holidays. I don't think I ever went to a Shabbat service unless it was for one of my friends' bar bat mitzvahs. The family was still proudly and fiercely Jewish, but secularly so. We raised money for all sorts of Jewish causes, threw our nickels and dimes into the ubiquitous blue and white pushkis, and though we practiced the communal tenets of Judaism, we really didn't practice any official religion. However, things changed when, at 16, I got a summer job at Brandeis Camp Institute in Simi Valley as a junior counselor and lifeguard. The camp was directed by the brilliant scholar Shlomo Bardin, and it was strictly kosher and Shomer Shabbos. What an awakening. Shlomo mesmerizes with Hasidic tales, drashas on Torah, Jewish law, and so forth. We couldn't get enough of it. And the crown jewel on of the experience was Shabbat, a real Shabbat, every week. On Friday afternoon, everyone cleaned up, dressed all in white. Erev Shabbat was candle lighting, a special meal, not just crummy camp food. There was singing, Israeli dancing, and for the first time I was introduced to the Birkat Hamazon, which I had never heard before. Saturday was a day of rest. Morning services, study, discussion groups, more singing and dancing, and Havdalah under the stars. Yes, we grew up proudly Jewish, but it was almost entirely secular. My mother had grown up with a Christmas tree every year because, so reasoned my immigrant grandparents, all Americans had Christmas trees. There was nothing religious about it. They just wanted to throw off the horrors of the old country and be like the rest of Americans. My father, by contrast, grew up Orthodox, got nothing out of the all-Hebrew services, and was thrilled to discover Reform Judaism. I'm not sure he was fully sold on the Christmas tree topped with the Star of David, but he went along with it because my mother loved it. But my best friend, David Holtzman, who somehow put up with my Sephardic Pesach peanut butter and matzah sandwich, was apoplectic that we could have a fir tree sitting in the middle of our Hanukkah decorations. Now back to Brandeis. I fell so in love with all the Jewish tradition that I had missed that when summer was over and I returned home, I demanded my parents that we have Shabbat dinners, say the prayers, have a little challah and wine. And most certainly we were not to have any more Christmas trees. I prevailed, and at least until I went away to college, Shabbat became a part of our family routine. I attended Berkeley as an undergraduate, and again, most of my friends were Jewish, but my only formal contact with Judaism was at Hillel for the high holidays. And the same for my years in medical school, although the high holidays were now at Temple Emmanuel in Beverly Hills, where my parents had migrated. As a senior in medical school, I met the love of my life, Mattie, and we were married under the chuppah right after graduation by Rabbi Shai Zeldin at Stephen S. Weiss Synagogue, where our own Beth alum, Yoshi Zweiback, is now the senior rabbi. To the best of my knowledge, the Sheva Brachas were omitted, but I wouldn't have known differently in those days. And I mention this because fast forward a quarter of a century, and we would suddenly be introduced to a Judaism we never could have imagined. When our daughters were teens, both went on the annual Beth confirmation trip to Israel, which Rabbi Nevmatov I think we should reinstitute, and both fell in love with the country, vowing to return when in college. And return they did for their junior years abroad, both parenthetically during intifadas. Jody, our oldest daughter, also somehow wangled a research grant from Stanford to spend a semester in her senior year in college in Israel to study Jewish healing, having no real idea what that might be. And when she got to Israel, she realized there really was no Jewish healing. But she figured there must be something in Torah, so she began seriously learning Torah and somehow came up with her honors thesis on Jewish healing. When she returned home from her semester in Jerusalem, I picked her up at SFO on a Friday afternoon, and I'll never forget, the first thing she did when we got home was go to the refrigerator, turn off the lights, and close the door because I was shocked, but not oblivious, and I knew what that meant. She'd become Shomer Shabbos, in other words, Shabbat observant. So even passively, you can't turn on lights or turn them off during Shabbat. After college, she returned to Israel to live full-time and got a job as a cashier at Bonker's Bagels in Jerusalem, exactly what 4 years of tuition at Stanford University prepared her for. To make a long story short, she ultimately returned to America where, running a program at UC Berkeley Hillel, she met Rabbi Ossie Spiegel, the guest lecturer. They fell in love, and soon we had an Orthodox Chabad wedding to look forward to in Israel. Boy, did we learn a lot. A Chabad wedding, for those of you who haven't been to one, begins the week preceding the wedding. Both bride and groom are treated royally by their friends. The wedding in Israel was eye-opening. There's the ofruf, the fasting, the ketubah signing, the mothers breaking a plate, the bedekin, the walk to the chuppah, and all that entails, the vows, the circling, the ring exchange, the shever brachas, breaking the glass, mazel tov, and finally the yichud. When Maddie and I were married, under the chuppah in 1967, we were and remained ignorant of most of these traditions. But as we learned following the Chabad wedding, the fun was just beginning. Men on one side, women on the other, mechitza dividing them, no mingling. Wild dancing, acrobatics by the men, lots of vodka accompanied l'chaims, men in their area, women and girls in theirs, and on it goes for hours, getting wilder and wilder. If you ever have a chance to attend a Chabad wedding, do not, and I mean do not miss it. The most meaningful and most fun weddings imaginable. A couple of years go by, and our Jewish journey now gets into high gear as Jody and Ossie move back to the States. And Rabbi Ossie decides they will establish a Chabad house at the University of Oregon. Having no real money of their own, the bank of mom and dad soon becomes the proud owner of Chabad House of Eugene. And as they are frequent visitors with their growing family to Beit Carmel, our home in Portola Valley, we now need to be skilled in the laws of kashrut. How many of you, show of hands, have ever toiveled dishes and utensils? Okay, we've got 4. How many have even heard of toiveling? A few more hands. Well, to make them kosher, everything must be immersed in a moving body of water like the ocean or a stream. So having purchased new sets of dishes, pots, pans, etc., some for dairy, some for meat, my job before the kids arrive is to do the toiveling. That is, immersing everything in water while saying the proper prayer, making them kosher. Now, the closest body of water to our house is San Francisquito Creek, to which I schlep my purchases, slide down the muddy embankment, do the immersion, and avoid falling into the rushing water, say the prayer, stuff the now slightly muddied plates back into their containers so they can be washed clean at home, now properly koshered. We learn about the charts telling us precisely what time Shabbat comes and goes out at our latitude, the prayers over each food type, the washing of the hands before eating bread, how to look for the proper hechsher label on food containers, assuring that it's kosher. I learn from my 5-year-old grandson on a Shabbat walk not to smell the flowers, which I had started to do, as I may inadvertently pick one, changing the state of nature. And when I go to water a drooping houseplant, I'm cautioned to wait after Shabbat, and again, not to interfere with the natural state. Lights are left on overnight, having been strategically lit in the right places before sundown, analogous to not lighting or extinguishing a fire. When one of the grandchildren asks, "Mommy, why do we always have to recite a prayer before eating?" Our daughter patiently explains that unlike animals who eat instinctively, we must take a moment and consciously thank God for providing our food. It's a whole new spiritual world, Shabbat and Orthodox Judaism. And I begin to understand why Abraham Joshua Heschel describes Shabbat as a cathedral in time. Knowing how Maddie and I have learned to accommodate our Orthodox family, Rabbi Martyr one day asked us to visit some Beth Am congregants, upset that their kids have become Orthodox and refused to eat in their parents' non-kosher home. It's like you want your kids to marry Jewish, but not too Jewish, right? We assure our fellow congregants that the kids aren't rejecting you. It's that they've chosen to follow a certain set of laws. And until you parents learn to support that, inconvenient though it may be, your kosher kids can't eat in your non-kosher house. No different from them choosing not to run a red light or cheat on their taxes. You don't break the laws. Well, to keep up with my grandkids, I took years of Hebrew class from Beth Am's amazing teacher, Orna Marad, went to Torah study way back when our wonderful emeritus Rabbi Rick Block was teaching. And once I retired, I joined our weekly Talmud class, which from an intellectual standpoint strains every neuron in my brain. What a blessing we have, all that right in our backyard, so to speak. And as the Beth Am board member representing Beth Am men this evening, I can tell you, Hine Matovim and I am Shevet Achim Gam Yahad, how good and how pleasant it is sitting together with our brothers. And guys, if you've not been to one of our monthly breakfasts, you've missed some great food, great companionship, and most of all, the intellectual challenge of our rabbinically led discussions. I strongly recommend it. So that is a peek into the Jewish journey that has immeasurably enriched my life and has also allowed me to tell my family story and our Jewish story to our children and grandchildren, Lador Vador. If we are to truly know who we are, it is imperative in my mind to know from whence we've come. God, I think you'll agree, was pretty clever when he commanded us to tell the children. Shabbat Shalom.